So you mentioned at the beginning of the talk that one of the neglected areas of research was that it seems that some terms are not translated or incorporated because of this kind of association that they have with the L1 language or with Dutch in particularly situated contexts. And so my question was, is this related at all to particular kind of elements of eligibility? And in some ways, is that use of that term perhaps related to someone trying to index a certain aspect of the institutional process? I know that in this one, what have you found so far? I suppose.
I think it's mostly that. I mean, it's for instance names of particular entitlements, names of organizations often also. Yeah. Okay. But it's something that we haven't. I mean, we've sort of done a global scan of the data in those terms, but we haven't sort of looked in detail at that aspect yet. Yeah, but that seems to be, those two seem to be the most common ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I'm wondering if I was just thinking of this because there are several Nigerian clients in this data, and I'm wondering how does the sort of the degree of nativeness and foreignness in English play into this? Because it could conceivably be that the speakers of Nigerian English here are native speakers of Nigerian English, whereas the Dutch speakers are highly proficient foreign language speakers. And so there might be, I can see how there could be a context like for misunderstanding or otherwise, even though the client is a native speaker, just not a variety that is highly standardized in European.
Absolutely.
Is that?
Yeah. But then, so what's the implication? You have to do a language test before you analyze the data. I mean, this is where,
that's like a potential thing for
No, absolutely, yeah. Again, I mean, there are so many different possibilities, and so that is potentially, one of the big challenges. But at the same time, so much of this is also ad hoc decision making. I mean, certain officers in Brussels will be extremely reluctant to go for any kind of interpretive provision, because there is such an intimate connection with feeling, French dominance, experiences of French dominance historically, particularly in Dutch dominant areas, in what today are Dutch dominant areas, and protectionist measures. Whereas in other contexts, I mean, even within Ghent, which generally is a sort of, at the city level, I think a place which has tended to accommodate multilingualism in various ways. Again, you can note the difference between one health center where different doctors, and they make their own decisions, and you couldn't say there's a uniform policy, and then on the other hand, at one center in this area which has a large number of Turkish background immigrants, and sort of collectively moving towards a stage where half the group of GPs have learned and are actively using Turkish as multilingual professionals in interaction. So yeah, it's a highly diverse field, and it's a good question. Are we comparing things that can be compared? No, absolutely, I agree.
Thank you. I also wonder, in institutional encounters, there's such an asymmetry between the person at the institution doing these encounters repeatedly and having a script and a lot more information about the regulations and the rules and then the clients being very variable in the amount of world knowledge about the institution that they bring to the encounter and script knowledge about how things are going to play out. Some of them may have several experiences already of having dealt with the officers doing these things, but some of them may be completely
or they may have been coaching.
So, is there any way of incorporating that in the analysis analytically or accounting for that so that we understand more about the here and now, the interaction?
I think the obvious way to do it is, of course, to have interviewing afterwards. And in the case of the asylum, interviews have happened, but the problem is always that you interview immediately after, and you have at that moment no idea as to what is going to be relevant from your analysis and that you would like to put to these people. Yeah. But I mean, what's your guess when you're listening to the asylum data? Is this a client who was unaware that openly providing the information would increase his chances of success?
Is the second example?
Yes, the second one. What's
It doesn't look he's aware.
that's my impression. That's also my
Because
impression.
he would have
Doesn't look-
said it
Yeah.
various times, you know, that he had that relationship if he knew that that would allow him to get asylum.
Mhm.
So I would guess that.
Well, I think that's also was our guess on the basis of looking at the sort of the way the interaction unfolds, also the way that he volunteers the information. But that's sort of based on contextualization cues, which you're reading in a particular way. But it's interesting, I mean, on one other occasion where I showed the data, someone was actually saying, this client, how can you know that this is not a client who is aware that this will make the difference, but if you're too forthcoming, that you may be, this, I don't know. It's a,
I mean, it can be, because of stigma surrounding something, speaking to an institutional representative, regardless of
absolutely,
if
yeah,
they're,
yeah. Yeah. But that is also, I mean, that is a reason, one of the reasons why the institutional rule book says, if this surfaces, then you need to stop.
okay.
A new interview with a different set of conditions needs to be conducted. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Have you worked also on the impact of things like the conversational style? Because the timing of questions and the rhythm of questions and the way you pose questions are as important, I think,
Absolutely, yeah.
to those reactions
Yeah.
as the words that you put.
And obviously here, the asylum officer, there are written, there's the writing of documents that sort of comes in between and it leads to pauses. Does that make the questioning heavier?
Because she's obviously
Yeah.
taking notes and doing her report in real time.
The effect on the client of being suspended from interaction while someone is, I mean, yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's highly relevant.
And drawing off that point, I'm actually looking at the discourse of emergency call dispatchers at the moment. And I'm looking at specific interactions where they are calling 911 dispatchers because they're university dispatchers. And it's a similar situation where they place the caller on hold essentially to fill in the report as they ask these questions. But I'm just wondering if you've examined kind of the degrees of co-membership, as Erickson mentions, in these interactions. Have you noticed that, say, people with kind of similar backgrounds of multilingual identities kind of are able to overcome some of these timing issues because of that, or?
That's an interesting, right, okay. No, we didn't look at that, but it's an interesting suggestion. So the suggestion would be then that if you share interactional histories, in the sense of a similar set of experiences, you know how to deal with and play and understand these elements of timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a way which perhaps you cannot. Yeah. That's an interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting one to pursue. Yeah.
Something that I noticed across these three data excerpts is that also relating to the nature of institutional discourse is that the interaction is goal-oriented. And I'm wondering, so the asylum seekers and the asylum officers both know that there is a goal to achieve, but I'm wondering if that goal-seeking or problem-solving process is compromised when English is used as a lingua franca.
It can be. If I understood, I hope I understood your question correctly. But I think it can be compromised, but it need not necessarily be compromised. Then what is the alternative? The alternative would be an interpreter, a professional interpreter. Would a professional, does a professional interpreter come with guarantees that the goal-orientedness is not compromised? That's a good question. Again, I would not simply answer that question affirmative. There's lots of things that can go wrong with interpreters. One of them is their neutrality. I mean, I mean, I always pick up that one because interpreters often have a hard time for various reasons. Interpreters may have a hard time because the institutional agents expect them to take over their role. And we have seen instances where that's the case. Where you're almost handing over to the interpreter and you can talk to the client directly. So, interpreters may have a hard time because interpreters, often for particular languages, certified interpreters may share an ethnic or national background with the client. Clients may be expecting allegiance. So then neutrality is often, But interpreters, for good reasons, have to maintain neutrality. Also, for instance, when they actually see misunderstandings happening. They can't say, sorry guys, we need to pause. I see that you're misunderstanding one another. No, strictly speaking, as an interpreter, you can't do that. So does interpreting come with better guarantees? I would not simply say that is necessarily the case, although I imagine I'm probably right if I say that there may be lots of situations where perhaps it is advisable to have a professional interpreter. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Very diplomatic.
Yeah.
Have you also observed cases where the interpreter, the problem is with sensitive topics, or when interpreters a lack of trust or mistrust that sensitive information is going to be going out into the community, so to speak?
That's okay. Talking about a very different set of data. For instance, one of the reasons for these 4 doctors to learn Turkish is one of them is a woman doctor, and she said, I want to be talking to these young brides that come from Turkey directly, also about family planning, without mothers-in-law or fathers-in-law or relatives being. Or I no longer want to be facing situations where delicate adult matters of health need to be mediated by child interpreters who are brought along. The question also of do the children cognitively grasp what's going on? Yeah.
I was wondering if you had looked at the difference between having a professional interpreter who, ideally must remain neutral, and having a friend or a relative interpreting, and if there is more advocacy going on.
More advocacy?
Yeah, advocacy on the client end, and comparing those.
We haven't looked at that directly ourselves, but it does occur. But one of the things which are also interesting is that particularly doctors are often not necessarily negative to informal interpreters because they see informal interpreters as a sort of variant of people who accompany the patient. For instance, we may be accompanying parents of a much older, when they are much older, and you accompany them to the doctor and you mediate on their behalf. So, one of the classics that we often cite is this doctor saying, next time you come, again, bring your niece, because she did it very well, and which also meant sort of the sensitivity that is applies to a situation that having been taken on successfully by the informal mediator. Again, I know in my colleagues from interpreting studies usually start looking cross at me when I take things like, sometimes informal interpreters are a great idea. but anyway, that's a different kind of debate. I don't know to what extent that debate is alive here. It's a similar, yeah.
Language program.
Yeah.
And other kinds of interpretation.
I think one of the reasons why you would, and that's I think the bit which I definitely appreciate, is that interpreters are, I mean, this is a profession that is very often dependent on money lines which are not structured, which might be project-based or temporary or having come with a legacy, a particular sort of period of legacy in the local government. And they are very vulnerable money lines. Interpreting is not the best paid profession. And we're not even getting now into the horror stories of interpreters, people who have professionally interpreted for courts and are waiting 2-3 years before they get their money. I mean, so in a sense, yeah, it's not an easy profession to be in. Yeah. And I can see how, for them, it's often also a sensitive matter if work would argue that there are situations where, you know, informal interpreters do a marvelous job, or where you would say lingua franca use is something that works successfully, because in a sense these are kind of observations which could easily be taken to speak against the need for the profession, and it's a profession under pressure. You know, I mean, I do sympathize with that. So none of what I say will be hopefully translated in public statements about the need or not.
So we're out of our regular time.
Okay.
Some of us are going to move on to Epicurean for a Thursday night happy hour. So please do join
Thank you.
us.